So I think people need to think of a comprehensive food provision solution that involves a tiered support, like think military. It's about keeping the enemy as far away from you as possible. So you need rings of defense. So you might have a garden out here, but what happens if that garden goes bad? What's your next ring? How do you get it in until you're down to your 6 month supply of MREs and ready to eat food?
And good afternoon, everyone. Got Jeff Raymond with me. Remember, I was testing and still am testing the Eden Grow System. Remember, we're going to need to think about bringing our food growing indoors to A, to protect it, and B, for some of the changes that we're seeing in the climate. Now, the reason I'm wanted to talk to Jeff today, too, is all these things are happening in the world. We saw the CrowdStrike thing, which knocked down your ability to purchase food, by the way, if you didn't know that. The self-checkout lines were down. The debit cards were not functioning correctly. The just-in-time ordering system completely awry. The bar scan codes that couldn't register an actual quantity for a product, not available for sale. You might have had the money, but your ability to buy that food, purchase that food, we went right up to the razor's edge of supermarkets stopping because of the backup in ordering that would have caused devastation, cascading failures, where if it's a linchpin of all the food delivery systems, or that is somehow interfered with, this food delivery system that we have that's so interconnected, then what? Truly, then what? So that's only one of 1,000 things to cover today. Remember, automatic indoor ag is the future, and grow anything. So Jeff, appreciate you joining me. Might have been a long-winded intro, but I was just trying to frame it as the food could be in the store, but if there's no way for you to pay for it, or those companies to inventory it, they're not going to sell it because it's going to cause so many problems later down the road. They are going to lock the stores up versus having all that, yarn stuck together that they're trying to pull out of a giant knot after this event finishes.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, David, as always, and appreciate everything you're doing. I think you're out there helping wake a lot of people up and informing everybody of what's going on. Yeah, your last video going over the major global shutdown of a lot of servers, mostly all enterprise. First thing I did was start checking my systems and wondering if anything with Microsoft was going to work. And most people, because their phones and because their computers weren't really impacted, they probably didn't fully understand how big of a deal this really is. But like you said, I do write code. I write code for our company, Eden Grow Systems. I've been here now over 7 years. Aerospace engineer for those that don't know me, so I'm very technical. Come from the Air Force, top secret satellite programs, all those kind of things, right? So a pretty good background on the technology side of things. The bottom line here is the simple fact that this glitch was even allowed to get out into the wild is a failure of extreme magnitudes. My understanding of the technical side of it is there was something called it's kind of technical, a null pointer exception. And what this simply means is that there was a line of code that was allowed to be empty. So essentially, it's like dividing by zero. For those that aren't into math, you can't divide by zero because how many times does zero go into 100? It's an undefined quantity. And this is essentially the simple version of what a null pointer is. It's an empty value that's allowed to persist in the system. And then because it's empty, none of the equations, none of the math, none of the logic can actually work because it's like, I've got nothing. What do I do with nothing? I'm not programmed to work with nothing. I'm programmed to work with something. Now, that null pointer exception is a junior code kind of error. In other words, someone like me who's just getting started 7 years ago writing code, I make those mistakes. CrowdStrike is not junior code.
President Trump warned the U.S. dollar is crashing and will no longer be the world standard. This will be our greatest defeat in 200 years. Saudi Arabia ended the petrodollar, which cemented the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. Russia shocked the international markets and replaced U.S. dollars with Chinese yuan for all currency trade. BRICS, attracting more and more countries and moving away from the U.S. dollar. A global de-dollarization trend accelerates. After the presidential debate, the global stage sees how vulnerable the U.S. really is. Gold is security in times of uncertainty, and gold remains a core asset to hold ahead of the U.S. election. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. And Patriot Gold Group has an OP for Life IRA, where your IRA or 401k could be in physical gold or silver. No fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now Patriot Gold Group, for the 7th year in a row, Consumer Affairs top-rated IRA gold dealer. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video.
And then what they have on top of their junior coders are intermediate coders, senior coders, chief coders. Then there's usually a chief scientist or chief product officer. And all the way up, there's also quality divisions that are there where they do recursive testing on everything to make sure that when they push a release, there's not something as simple as a null pointer exception. When you hit compile, when you're writing code, you use something called a compiler. And when you hit the go button to compile it, if there's a null pointer exception, every compiler finds it nowadays. It's one of those simple things that have been around. So what we're left with is analyzing the situation of, it's a super simple error. There was multiple levels of failures that allowed this thing to get out into the wild. You're looking at gross negligence or gross incompetence, which they don't. That doesn't even compute, right? That's a null pointer exception of itself. There's no way that this had that level of incompetence or it has to be negligence. So then you're left with, well, what are the impacts of this? And as you were pointing out, you're expecting to be able to go to the store and get your own food. It really doesn't matter if you can't use your credit card. Doesn't matter if you can't get cash out of the ATM. You have to finish that last tactical mile of the transaction to be able to get what you're looking for. And whether it's food or whether it's gasoline or whether it's cash at the ATM or whether you're going to a restaurant to eat or go back to school supplies, you still need that transaction. And what we're seeing here is that our systems are very, very susceptible to either negligent actions, or worse would be actual attack, where people are positioned correctly to be able to let something like this out. And it makes us all very, very vulnerable to a point of, like you said in your last video, we really need to start ramping up the preparedness again. Preparedness is a cyclical thing, just like history. We go through those times where it seems like everything's ending. So the preparedness side of us, we all get amped up and we're out there talking and get ready. And then something kind of happens and maybe it peters off and then we get quiet, we get comfortable again. Well, this one really seems bad. I tend to be on the side that this seems like it was a nefarious action, because there's no way. I don't allow null pointer exceptions in my small software company. In my company, we do software as well. That I just don't see how that's possible. So I think that this was a stepping stone. It makes a lot of sense, the analysis that's been done, that this is a stepping stone event, kind of a test on the system, if you will. And when you combine it with basically the activities of the last week, both this last weekend with President Biden's announcement or pseudo announcement on Twitter, I guess you can say, as well as the attempt on President Trump's life, those things, when you add this to it, man, it's questionable. I'll pause there.
No, I would agree. I mean, think about how quickly it changed the narrative of citizen journalists coming out, pointing out every discrepancy using just off-the-shelf software to analyze audio. Like anybody with a $30 audio, program could do the same exact thing, listen to the rally and then listen to the sounds within that. And then anybody can do that. So for agencies to come out and give false narrative and somebody with $30, software can disprove that. And now everybody's doing it. They saw the first couple people do it and like, I don't believe it. I'm going to do it myself. And they've come up with the same conclusion. So the citizen journalists are outrunning the corporate media in terms of the story was laid this way, but no more than an hour later, a citizen journalist with an extra double espresso in them has gotten on it. And I just disproved that. If no, walk down the road with me here. The end result for a lot of these plans that we see for globalist kind of sovereign national above multinational supranational is probably the best way to talk about that, is controlling the food supply, because then it's easy to then control citizens to make them bend to your requests. Now, how small of an action? There would really be no finger pointing if this is true, what I was watching and listening to yesterday, that some companies, especially in the food delivery services sector, are unable to locate their BitLocker encryption keys. Imagine if it was a linchpin, like I say, a linchpin of food delivery services that has a tie-in like an octopus to every other food delivery service provider across the United States and internationally as well. If just that one company were to shut down and not able to become operational again, the reverberations from that would cause spot shortages first across the entire supermarket sphere in the United States, and then to come back to start to get back into paper ordering again. Like, these things, are going to frustrate people that are working at these companies to the point of like extreme stress levels of having to learn new systems, which we went away with. We should be backing everything up with paper. We lost that. We're so reliant on digital. So who in a corporate structure down can still remember doing things the old way, like entering in paper and then entering it onto a screen as data entry, where you still have those two parallel systems? Like, if there is a lockup where somebody is unable to access their servers, and I'm talking about, like I say, 5,000 servers that are going to be non-operational, and they're just going to have to start from zero again until they can unencrypt that somehow. The amount of fear built into that and the amount of food shortages that it would cause would fit right in. And then the next step would be, oh, we need to maybe ration some products here. And everybody's getting a little nervous because this food supply company can't deliver. And everything is slowed down tremendously back to the way it was in the paper level. So how much would the prices rise? That's one thing. And then your access to food, the choices are going to be diminished as they start to shuffle things around. And then just the automatic delivery and scheduling of that will be disrupted. So you could really start to see there'll be spot shortages that'll just pop up here and there because of the non-availability to order. And I'm just saying if they cannot get their systems back online, then what does that do to company operations? You know better than I. I'm just asking the question here, and frame it in, like I say, food delivery services, just in time, cold storage. You're going to need loading manifest or loading books to get those on the trucks to get them. What about the rails? There's a lot of interoperables in that just-in-time delivery system. Forget just the trucks. What about the trains as well? Walk me through that daisy chain of scariness.
Yeah, well, like you said, there was a time in our history where we used to have backups. I remember being in retail, 20 years ago, 25 years ago now. Can't believe how time keeps moving on. But when we were there and the power would go out, we didn't stop selling things. What we did is we got these little things called the card, swipers, where we actually put the credit card in. There was a carbon copy event where you got your carbon paper and you swiped the card, you put everything down on it, you gave the receipt to the customer, and then you would send those in to the credit card company to process all those. We used to have those things, and nowadays we don't have those things because we've become so dependent on the electrical system. So that you're pointing out the thing that I would say most people aren't aware of. They don't think about that because we're so used to having the convenience. Even when the power goes out for a little bit of time, people can sit and wait. But if you don't have cash, that's the only other backup on some of these things. That's on the purchasing side. So we used to have those. We don't have those anymore. The system's moved on to be fully digital, which is, as you're pointing out, makes us very susceptible to these types of situations. When it comes to corporations, everything that we do at Eden, I run the entire enterprise architecture, which is all the computer stuff, and everything we do is on the cloud. We cannot afford to have our own server farm. We cannot afford to have our own ISP that allows internet service provider that allows enough access to a server farm. It's just too expensive. So most corporations today operate on AWS, Azure, DigitalOcean, any of these cloud providers. I would say that most of the cloud providers are going to be okay because they do have an army of people that are there, to help stop these things. Though there's a whole nother area still they got impacted in how in the world could they even allow that to happen. They tend to have switchovers, right? So what they'll do is they'll have one server over here that has your stuff on it, and it'll be copying data over here so they can switch over. But if the bug exists in both places, then they can't really spin up the second one, but they can do some editing without spinning it up. There's some technical ways you can get in there. So there's a way to hand things over. But when it comes to like all your log files, like you're talking about the trains, planes, automobiles, buses, schedules, all those kind of things, scheduling is all done by computers now. You don't have a person just sitting there going, okay, first you're going to go to stop A, then stop B, and then what's the address, and let me give you a book. Those are all things that basically come to a screeching halt. And we saw that during COVID when we saw all the trucks lining up at the ports because there wasn't enough people to do the offloading. And there's just limits to the system. Technically, when it comes to all this stuff, if somebody shuts down all of our servers and to shut it down, I think the key thing to really emphasize to people who aren't technical, this shutdown wasn't like what you see in the movie War Games or, in a Tom Clancy novel where there's some fancy computer virus that somebody planted in and took over everything and, malware this and, it wasn't that. This was a very, very, very simple error, this null pointer exception. This is so simple, yet it brought down the entire world. That right there is the thing to focus on. Is it doesn't need to be this artificial intelligence software program that takes over the computers. It can be just a simple update that is pushed automatically because there's too many updates nowadays. Everything is all automatic. My servers update automatically. There's far too many transactions for a human to be involved in a lot of these things. So those things are very easy to get in. All you got to do is to bring down the system is place a few people long-term into a position where they can allow a certain quality issue to escape, and you can bring everything down. And hey, from the outside looking in, it's just a mistake. It's just a mistake. We're all human. We all tend to forgive when it's a mistake. This situation really opened my eyes to that. It doesn't need to be a big event. It doesn't need to be a huge attack. The attack can be huge, but it can be very simple in how it's executed. And that's what we saw here. And there is no real backup. There is no cutover that won't take time. People are very good at adapting. Companies need to make money, even when there's no way to transact it. They will start to adapt over time. So I guess worst case is that we're going to be in a situation where another one of these things, happens because, hey, guess what? They not only did they have this happen globally, but because it was such an emergency, they rushed out a fix, right? That fix went through the same exact process that allowed the first one to get through. My question is, what did they rush out? What was pushed out in the urgency to get this thing fixed? How many companies that, or maybe like you, maybe like me, a little more cautious that, you and I were talking before we started recording how, we do things to delay those updates. Well, what happens when you are a business owner who is very conscientious of these potential updates, and then you see the rest of the world is now impacted by this? You're going to actually probably be convinced to do an update because you don't want that to happen against your better judgment because of how scary and how big the impact is. The risk is huge. So I think we got to be aware of a potential second wave on this one. I think from a warfare standpoint, former Air Force, former information operations officer, I think they had a great opportunity here to test out the system, kind of poke the bear, if you will, see what happens, see how the people respond. Most people weren't even aware this really happened, so it was kind of like, hey, you could turn everything off, and most people aren't going to get it. And then I think they probably pushed something out.
provided their computers are turned on to receive that
Correct. Yep,
update. So
that is
what,
correct.
and one thing one thing I keep seeing in this, all right, they're pushing the, oh, look, Delta is back online again. Alaska Airlines back online again. Now, what I noticed they're focusing on is all the companies that are back online again. What I don't see is that big old long list of ones that are struggling to still come on, that can't fix their problems. I mean, that is completely left out of our radar on purpose, because they don't want you to know to the vastness of this. If you're talking on a war fronting, taking out the food and the communications, I think are some of the first things that you would go for. And
Communication in particular, yeah. It's like that scene in Star Wars. I know it's Star Wars, but hey, when you're getting ready to attack, communications, whether it's science fiction or not, is definitely something you want to take out first. Because if your enemy can't communicate, they can't organize. So they can't organize, they can't resist, they can't fight effectively. So yeah, that's one of the basic rules of warfare. And I think we definitely saw some warfare happening here. And I think it's setting stuff up too for the idea that you need more oversight. Hey, these things allowed to happen. Look at how big the impact is. And when the normies finally do wake up and they see what the impact is, they're going to be screaming, save us, save us, save us. Don't allow, how dare you let this happen? This is negligence, like what I was saying earlier. It was negligent or it was purposeful. And I can't believe it's negligent because there's no way that their quality control system would allow that to get out. But what ends up happening is that people are shepherded into this. We need more control. We need more oversight. And we've seen over the last few decades now how people have been, what is it? The problem reaction solution chain, right? You get into this problem, everybody reacts a certain way. It takes people from one way of thinking to another, and then they get the solution that they already want in place. As you know, you and I have spoke before about my faith and the things that are going on. I know you brought it up in some of your episodes lately, but what we're headed towards is a system that has ultimate control, that has ultimate observation over you as an individual, knows what you buy, knows what you sell, and has the ability to stop you from doing those things. And if you were to talk about that 20, 30 years ago, people would have been like, no way, that's never going to happen. But here we are today where we see, one, how interconnected everything is, how the digital sphere is so connected to other parts of the digital sphere. And we see, I think, we observe at least behaviors, actions that are occurring that drive people towards, I need more surveillance, I need more control, we need somebody there watching. In fact, I was just watching a commentary the other day, and I'll stop here, but it was how, during COVID, there was a group of very conservative people who are like, there's no way I'm going to let you give me a passport. There's no way I'm going to let you monitor my life. There's no way we're going to have digital IDs. Those are all wrong and horrible because it's all about freedom of movement, and I don't want to be observed. Those same people now are screaming about how illegal immigrants need to have digital IDs. We need to have facial scanning, facial recognition. We need to have AI watching and tracking these millions of people. We need to have this control now. I think that's what we're seeing here as well. We're going to see a shift towards more control. You can't trust these organizations. But on the flip side of what I'm saying too is CrowdStrike, they're part of a lot of systems. This is a company that's tied into a lot here. And if just one little mistake like this can cause such an interruption, imagine if there was a slightly bigger one, or imagine all the other systems they're tied into. It's a really big concern. And moving into food is, I think everybody, like I've said, every time I've been on your show, if you have a little bit of land, if you have a front porch, if you have a garden, if you have a tower, or you have the ability to grow food at all, I don't care how, start growing food. Get growing, get going, because it's not easy to learn how to do. That's part of what we've done at Eden, is try to, figure out how to help people with that. In fact, I just got done putting a survey up. I'd love people to go take it on our website. I'm just asking people, what can my company do to help you as an individual be food independent? What do you need? What are your problems? What are your hard points? I sit there and I can create technology all day long, but technology costs money. And right now times are hard. I had last year 200% cost of goods increase. Nobody can tell me inflation isn't real. That's how much it cost me. That's how much my costs went up to build the same thing I was building in January as compared to December. That continues to happen. So what are your pain points out there? What are things that a company like mine that actually cares about people, that was founded on the principles of independence and freedom, and is actually believes I'm here because God told me to go help people? What can I do to help? Um, I'm a private company and I'm here to help. Tell me what I need to know. So let me know what your problems are, folks. I'd love to be able to help you.
Yeah, ours were pests in the natural outdoor garden, and we ended up buying these things that have a little tiny solar panel on them. You screw them in the ground, and then they vibrate every so often, and they scare off the deer, they scare off the rabbit. It's almost
Oh
like
yeah.
a human being around. I could suggest anybody, if you're having problems outdoor with the pests, are really strange this year, because growing indoor, there's a lot more control over what you can control in terms of the pests. That's our big thing this year. We've never had this many pests. I don't know if it's nature trying to front run something big for the winter, cold for the winter, early winter, but everything is 10 times more prep than it normally is that we've seen. And the number of insects this year was outrageous. But we had the cicadas, but then we had the Japanese beetles follow, but they were extraordinarily dense this year. And the ants are out of control. The rabbits are out of control. We got these underground moles that seem to just never
Yeah.
stop. Nature is getting ready for something. So if nature is, then what's that, firewall you can put up between nature trying to grab what you're also preparing? Growing indoor and outdoor is just such a night and day difference, and the
Yeah.
ease of it as well, like the maintenance, et cetera, going out, rebuilding beds or soils. You're always trying to pick something, you got to water it. It's heat. We had a drought here, but just doing it indoor and controlling it. So, the rotational cycle as well, because you can leave those lights on as long as you want. You can go
Yep.
18.6 or whatever when you have them on.
When I talk to people, my company, for everyone, we build systems like David is talking about. He has one of our systems and he's been testing out for us, giving us feedback on things we can make improvements on. And we actually have a whole brand new version that's just come out, our 9th iteration. But I talk to people and I listen to what they're going through. And some of the things that I deal with the most are, if you have land and everything and you already have your gardens all set up, man, that is awesome. Like I said earlier, you should be growing food. But as David just pointed out, there are so many things that we end up spending money on, or time is money, on to make sure you get that food. So you don't even know what's coming out of the sky anymore. And if you're going to collect rainwater, which I think you should definitely have filtration. You should either distill it, or you should have a really solid RO system that's going to help you. But even then, I'd still distill it, especially if you're in a more heavily populated area. That's just that one thing. What about security? What about if let's say that another cyber attack occurs, because I think this was a cyber attack. I think it was a small one. I think it was a test, like sending up a little piece of smoke, see how things go. Let's say that happens and everything shuts down, but this time it shuts down for months, right? And it comes back on and everybody adapts and all that, but that takes months. What happens when people start walking around seeing that you got a huge garden and you're growing all this food? You going to stay up 24/7 to protect that? Because that's what happens when a society starts to fall. And I think not only do we have to worry about the nutrients and our environmental factors, what I do know is that it's really hard to grow food when it's really cold. It's really hard to grow food when it's really dark. It's really hard to grow food when it's really hot and dry and you have no water. And so put all that together and it's really hard to grow food. So I think people need to think of a comprehensive food provision solution that involves a tiered support, like think military. It's about keeping the enemy as far away from you as possible. So you need rings of defense. So you might have a garden out here, but what happens if that garden goes bad? What's your next ring? How do you get it in until you're down to your 6-month supply of MREs and ready to eat food? That should be part of your ring defense system. It's not one or the other. You need to have a ring defense system when it comes to your food supply. Start out here with growing food, move it in closer to your home, maybe. My wife and I have talked about it. Times are tough for us too right now. If we had money, I'd be ripping up my yard and I'd be putting in the irrigation and everything that needs to be so I can grow food right in my yard. I've got my garden, I've got my yard, I've got grow towers inside, I've got my food supply for made meals ready to eat. I think everyone should be taking those kind of steps in your own way. And again, my company, I'm asking you, what can I do to help you, develop your ring support system? So please go take the survey. But Yeah, I think that's where we need to be at. And these types of attacks that we're seeing and the uncertainty, man, I don't know about you, but I feel in my bones a sense of darkness that I haven't felt ever, really, honestly. It feels like something big is about to happen. I don't know what. I'm not a prophet. When I look at the Bible, I can tell you what I think the outcome is going to be is they're going to do something that's going to trigger us all to be like, yes, I want to go into this new system that's going to save us and make everything better. And it's going to be peace and security. It's going to be something that just everybody's all super giddy about. In order to get everybody right now, we're all pretty different people and we're kind of all been divided into our little groups. And to get all those groups to come together, it has to be a pretty major event. And I think that's what we're headed towards. And I think we ultimately, we didn't talk about it too much, but I think we need to start talking about second economy. We need to start figuring out ways to spin up stuff offline from the major systems so that we can have communication, so we can have transactions, so we can have community.